大家好，今天我来给你们介绍一下怎么学中文。I'm going to break down some of the things that are the most challenging about Chinese and show you how you can make it easier for yourself and enjoy the process more. Don't learn the tones directly because tones are incredibly challenging. But the thing is, if you don't come from a language that has tones in it, then you're not going to be able to hear it. Like there's no use listening to Chinese tones and like recordings over and over again because you're not used to it. So you have to start by learning the words and learning the grammar. It's a concept called comprehensive input. My approach to this is using what you can understand to learn what you can't yet. So you can learn vocab, you can learn grammar, and if you put those together and you learn enough grammar and enough words, you will be able to not focus on every little detail, like making sure you're speaking correctly, making sure that you have the right pronunciation, have the right grammar, you're using the right word. Once you get to the point where that's not all, like you're not facing all of those challenges all at once, at that time, you'll be able to really focus in on the tones and you'll be able to hear it because you'll be able to hear a flow of a sentence. Because in Chinese, the tones do change. You're not going to be able to get everything down right away. You're going to need to take it chunk by chunk, and you're going to need to be able to hear and focus in only on the tones. The goal of what you're trying to do when you're trying to learn tones is to focus on learning vocab and grammar. After you've mastered vocab and grammar, then the tones will be very, very apparent. But if you spend too much time listening to recordings, you'll end up practicing incorrect pronunciation, and that will stick with you for a very long time. So focus on all the other elements that you can control and that you can consume, and then go to the tones later. The next most challenging part is the characters. The characters of Chinese are extremely challenging. The methods that are taught are the worst part. If you actually take the methods from most Chinese teachers, what they'll say is that you need to write over and over and over again until you memorize the character. And I don't think that's effective. And I'm actually going to show you a hack that is so much more effective that it almost seems like a joke that that is the method you're taught. So what I'm showing you here is 3 Chinese characters. These characters, each one of them have this water radical on the side. So what is a radical? A radical is part of a Chinese character that has a meaning and it also has a varying of structures. So this one, if you've seen the water, the character for water, this is the same thing. It's just put in a slightly different way. And then what do these words mean? What these words mean, this one is lake, this one is river, and this one might surprise you. This one means desert. Desert. How is it possible that these words with such different meanings and a connection to the word water can all be... How is it possible that desert has a connection to water? Right? It doesn't really make sense until you look at the other radical. The other radical here is shao, which is few or very little. And when you put those two together, water and very few or very little, it starts to make sense why you would have that. It starts to make sense why it would mean desert, because in the desert, there's very, very little water. And this is what I want you all to do. What I want you to do is I want you to study the radicals first. And then once you study the radicals, you'll be able to start to see all the pieces of meaning in Chinese. And when you start to understand how these pieces of meaning come together, then you'll be able to understand the words much more easily. You can create your own stories and your own explanations for how these words come together. And you don't actually have to worry at all about having like the right ideas or the right approach to the characters, because it's okay to be wrong as long as it helps you remember the characters. But then after you've learned a couple hundred Chinese characters, you'll start to have a picture for how words are generated within Chinese. And how can you understand it and how is it that you can put this web of meaning together that you will be able to remember it and be able to write it and read it? These things will come together over time. But sitting down and just memorizing it, like at the beginning, this just looks like Just like you have to remember each part, each like line of the character. But if you think about it like this means water, or this means water, and this means little, now there's two components to the structure that start to make sense. Otherwise, it's just there's no structure to it that you can use to understand. This is a super important way to learn Chinese. If you take this method, it'll make the characters so much easier. So last tip, and this is actually the most important tip for anyone who wants to learn any language, Chinese, French, any language you want to learn. This is the most important thing, and it's about memory. As students, we often forget what we've learned. I remember times where I would actually be studying I'd be studying the vocab, and by the time I'd flip the page over, I had already forgotten the words I'd just learned. And it's irritating to go through this over and over again. But especially when you're learning a language like Chinese, you have to remember that there are so many things that make this language difficult for you to learn. You have to learn new pronunciation. You have to learn new grammar. You have to understand, you have to try to make sure you're pronouncing the words correctly with the tones. And then also you're learning about a new culture that is so different from your own that you're like, if you just take a second to like think about all those factors, the fact that you can't intake it all at the same time becomes more reasonable, and you can kind of just accept that it's going to take you a while. But if you keep going with the path, and once things start to come together, you'll find that it becomes so much easier so quickly. For those of you who are learning Chinese, understand that at the beginning, you have to face so many challenges. You have to face so many challenges just to get to the point where you can get a basic level in the language. But once you get past that, once you get past all those challenges, you'll be able to understand and learn much more quickly. Like in your first year of learning Chinese, you might go, let's make this in miles, right? In your first year of learning Chinese, you might end up going like, a quarter mile. But in your second year of learning Chinese, you might end up going 3 miles. You'll go so much further, so much faster once you've overcome these challenges. Allow yourself to let go of the challenges that come with the early part of learning. And the next part, for memory especially, is experiences. Experiences guide everything in language learning when it comes to things sticking with you. If you're meeting people and you're going out to lunch and they order something you've never heard of before and you love that dish, and then you end up thinking about, I want to try and have that dish next time I go out. So you try your best to remember the word, and then you can't remember it the next time you go, so you have to find some way to explain it. You explain the word to somebody and they're like, you must be looking for this dish. And then you try it, you remember it, and now that experience of you really enjoying something, forgetting it, trying to figure it out, and then actually getting the dish, or like finding out the name, remembering it, ordering it, and then being able to share it with other people later. Like these experiences and these emotions that you have throughout that process is what's going to help you the most. So what you need to do is you need to find people that you can speak with. And the way that you can do that, I will tell you in the next video. So make sure to subscribe, comment if you have any questions for me, and I'll see you in the next one.